Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 2 of the Q&As, so let's go ahead and get this started. All right, first question. 3 different people asked about intermediate programming, Jason. Maybe this could be a topic you make some deep dives into for us novices. Honestly, I don't write a lot of intermediate programming. Number 1, because there's a lot of good intermediate programs out there. Number 2, I have one already. And number 3, I like to think of the intermediate phase as people's experimentation time, right? I don't think novice lifters should experiment. I think people with less than 1 year of structured training that they follow perfectly to the letter should never experiment. Like, you need a minimum of 1 year of hard training under someone else. After that, you should experiment. Find, quote, what works for you. But novices have no way to even assess what works for them. They need to have someone more experienced write the programming, and they need to have 0 deviation from it. I like to see intermediates branch out a little bit, experiment a bit. So what are you supposed to do different as an intermediate? Stop focusing on individual changes from workout to workout. That's one of the biggest differences. Intermediates need to be thinking in terms of weekly progress and monthly progress, less than workout to workout. Intermediates need to start experimenting with exercise variation. Intermediates need to start looking at weak point training. Hey, where are my weak links? So I need accessory movements, assistance movements. And intermediates can possibly start looking into different forms of periodization. Right? What I like to see for an intermediate is some sort of really slow linear progression, or linear periodization, or concurrent periodization with some addressment of their weak points. That's generally what intermediates need to do. And outside of that, I don't think that we need to cover that a lot, because the intermediate phase, you're going to run 2 or 3 different programs as an intermediate. That's your experimentation window to find what you enjoy, what works for you more after you finished out a novice phase, like a solid year of novice type training. And I don't like to set a lot of rules other than just those basic guidelines I've given, unless an intermediate wants a structured program, in which case I do have one. But there are also numerous other really good intermediate programs out there for people who don't want to run mine. In fact, I feel like there are more good intermediate programs out there than any other type of program. You know, they're time proven with decades of experience behind them. All right, next question. Any advice for Garfield's elbow, aggravated by chins and squatting? Had it for years. Yeah, I can give you a couple pointers. Be very careful of your total chin-up volume every week, right? You know that bothers it, so be mindful of it. You might even need to have periods of time to where you do nothing supinated, meaning no curls, and only double overhand grip pull-ups with an overhand grip, a pronated grip, right? You might need to do that. And I find that even the hammer grip, the neutral ones, can aggravate my tendon just as much as the chin-ups can. But what it comes down to is just watching the weekly volume. Number 2, low bar squatting, possibly out. For me, that's been a problem. I mean, people can argue that, yeah, you need to learn to tuck your elbows down and everything else, and that helps a little bit, but it seems to eventually happen no matter what. That's one reason I gave up low bar squatting many years ago. And I messed with it again quite a bit last year, and even a little bit earlier this year, and just went back to just straight high bar, because simply put, for me, due to, again, just my tendon and my bicep, it just seems to aggravate all my problems, makes it impossible for me to chin everything else. You may need to just go straight high bar squat, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you have this problem, that's what I would do. Spend a couple of months only high bar squatting and keeping your volume moderate to low for your chins, and see if that helps. All right, next question. My question is with regards to sets of 5s on the big lifts as a novice, form breakdown on the 4th rep, and the 5th rep as a grinder, and form is broken down, but no issue is put upon the lifter in regards to pain and such. Is this something that will eventually cause issues, and should I maybe reduce the weight, say 15%, and build up again, trying to keep form good, or is it good to learn how to train grinders as a novice on the last rep or 2 reps on the final set? Thanks, coach. I think learning to grind a little bit is not a bad thing, right? Learning to grind a little bit is not a bad thing. You're eventually going to hit grinders no matter what. If we add weight every workout, and then you get close to failure like that, and you hit a grinder before you reduce the weight, that's good. That's what we want to see. Learn to grind. But when you hit a true grinder, on that 5th rep, or in some cases the 4th rep can be a little bit of a grind. That's fine. You got your practice grinding. We reduce the weight 10% and increase from there. No, there's no need to go 15%. Go back and watch that video. Go to my Ice Cream Fitness 2.0 playlist and watch that video where I explain the resets. I've chosen 10% for a reason, and we do 10% because I want to see a certain amount of training volume that is within 5 reps of failure, right? We want to stay at a certain threshold, and we want to stay at a certain percentage of intensity. And if you cut 15%, you're going to have workouts with almost no adaptation. We want you to grow, get bigger and stronger off of every single workout. Yes, we want good form. Yes, we want you to practice form. Yes, you need to learn good technique. But if you're cutting 15% under a weight that you're grinding on the last rep with, you're no longer going heavy enough to learn good form. And if you don't have good form with lightweight, you have no business doing an exercise, right? If you can't practice textbook perfect form with weights that are under 80%, because that's what we're dealing with. I mean, a 5 rep max that's cut 10% is under 80% already. If you can't execute textbook perfect form with weights that are under 80%, even for 1 rep or 2 reps, you don't know how to perform the lift. You have no business training at all. You need to learn how to perform the exercise. You don't see real practice with good form till the weights start to get heavy enough that they could cause form degradation if your form isn't perfect. So no, 10% is fine. And a grinder here and there when you reach that threshold is fine. That grinder tells us that you're at your limit and it's time for a weight reset. But that 10% is enough. Reduce 10% and then increase it the next workout. It's pretty easy and it works. Trust me on this, it works. All right, next question. Hi Jason, I bought a 45-degree back extension. I found that this thing works my hamstrings like hell when I go deep and keep the pad low enough to hinge at the hip. I have the spud light and low pulley systems, and I can do tricep pushdowns and leg curls with that thing, which is helpful while I was rehabbing my shoulder. But seriously, 8 reps of back extensions, and I was unable to do a single rep of the weight. I could normally do about 15 reps on leg curl. Seems like the leg curl does not hit the hamstrings as well as the low back extension, but if the back extension works the hamstring so well, while also hitting the glutes and low back harder than the GHD, why is it so underrated? I guess it's because it's cheap. I paid $150 and it works. Not trendy. Thanks. Hyperextensions are great for your hamstrings. In fact, anyone who's never gone and done hyperextensions, first time you do them, you're probably going to notice hamstring cramps. But while I will say that devices like that will beat leg curls every time, the leg curl will work a function of the hamstring that hip hinge does not. So what do you need? In a perfect world, you get a glute ham raise, right? Hyperextensions, glute ham raises, and deadlifts. That will absolutely maximize your hamstring size, strength, all that stuff. But just keep in mind, you do need an exercise to where you get bending of the knee involved. That's where the glute ham raise is extremely useful. So you might want to factor that in also. Just something to think about. And the reason I say that, it comes down to number 1, muscular development, number 2, injury prevention. People who do a lot of glute ham raises, and particularly if you're doing back extensions like that also, tend to get much lower rates of hamstring tears on things like deadlifts, less hamstring tears in general out on the playing field because you're getting better overall hamstring development. But so consider maybe a glute ham raise also. That's the one thing that you need to factor in. It's not that those hyperextensions, particularly with deadlifts, aren't going to develop hamstrings. It's just that you are missing one of the functions of the muscle. You actually do need that bending of the knee to happen, the knee flexion. All right, next question and last question of the week. You said you were doing J-arm presses, I believe. What are your thoughts on the ability for it to create elbow tendinitis, since it seems similar to an incorrectly performed skull crusher, but without the isolation of the triceps? Does it make it less stressful on the triceps tendon? Because the load is distributed across multiple joints and it is a multi-joint exercise, it actually is less stressful on the tendon. Here's the thing that you have to remember. Here's the thing. The more you try to isolate a muscle into weird angles, the more stress you oftentimes put on tendons and the more potential there is for tendinitis. When you create a multi-joint movement like that, you actually reduce some of that. And I'm not saying it doesn't have some potential for it. If you were to overuse it with too much weight, too much volume, in theory, you could start seeing tendon inflammation, but the angles are different. the angles are different. You're not putting quite that same stress on the tendon the way that it rubs across the bone. It is less than on the poorly done skull crushers that are incorrectly done. And again, you're spreading the load across multiple tendons and joints by having an extra movement in there that's not just the elbow moving. It's the fact that when people try to reduce it down to just doing the elbows and just moving the elbow, where they would tell people, oh, don't move anything but the elbow, that's actually what creates a lot of the problem itself. So by having it as a multi-joint exercise, you do reduce the tendency for that, although the potential is still there. And I want that to be made clear. The potential is still there. So like with anything else, enough of any movement pattern done with too much volume, particularly with smaller exercises, always has some potential for tendinitis. But the JM press, it is going to be less than with a skull crusher or like a rope push down done to where you lock it in and only move the elbows. So just keep that in mind. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.